As part of my year one revisit series, as the channel turns into its second year, I wanted to revisit this one and offer it again. And this one had a little bit of a weird context to it, I guess. It took a few weeks for it to kind of really take off, but when it did, it got a lot of attention. It got a lot of likes and a lot of comments. I don't remember exactly what it was that prompted me to investigate this one or to consider making a video out of it, but I do remember not expecting what I found. I did not expect to find so much evidence to support this topic. I, in fact, had to stop myself from going in any further. The video was much longer than I had expected it to. I thought about trimming it down a little bit, but because this is something that never gets talked about, I wanted to leave it all in there. So I hope that you enjoy this revisit. Give me a shout out if you saw it when it was originally released. Thanks. I'll see you soon.
I think we need to talk about men and violence.
Men are getting more evil.
Why do we see so much rampant violence coming from men?
I'm 8 and I came here today because I want men to stop killing women because women are important.
Males make up about 70 to 85% of all arrests.
Stop killing us.
There is a severe rape problem.
Listen, if you're as tired as I am hearing about how violent men are, women can't walk down the street, they can't go through a parking lot after their shift at Buffalo Wild Wings. If you're sick of those topics and hearing about that all over the news, the media, and TikToks, I'm here to set the record straight. I've got some notes up here. What I want to do today is go through and have this discussion with you about women's increased propensity for violence, in particular assault, simple and aggravated, more serious assault, and their incarceration rates, things like that over the past several decades. I've got notes from several different sources here. I'm going to put links for all of them in the description of this video. Feel free to go through them and check out as many as you like. What I want to do is go through and first just go through a bunch of stats. This is going to be stats and graph heavy. So if that's your kind of thing, make sure you stick around. Because what I'm going to go through is stuff that doesn't hit the headlines. It doesn't go through... it's not something that people are going to talk about, whether it's the legacy news, TikToks, Instagrams, anything on Reddit groups. You might find something on Reddit. Everything is on there. And people have accused me in the past about cherry picking stuff that I put into my content. And in an example like this, my response is, well, fuck yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm cherry picking specific facts, data, sources to prove a point. And to say that I'm doing this in some form of retaliation or biased opinions, anything like that, I've got news for you. That's exactly what the news, women on TikTok, everyone else is doing. They're cherry picking the things that make men look bad, women look good, and that's what they give you. I'm cherry picking the stuff that they're not reporting on. So if you're new here, my name is Todd. I'm a psychologist, I'm an author, and I support men. I advocate for them. I would really like to see you subscribe. If this is the type of content that you're into, I do things like this. I break down more larger social issues, a lot of times through psychological and psychology theoretical backgrounds, and supporting men in relationships and marriages, things like that. So let me start by going through, as I mentioned, some of these highlights, and then I'll get into some of the images, some of the graphs, and actual sources. So first, let's talk about women being accused and arrests for violent crimes. I've got my notes up here. Overall arrests. Women's share of all adult arrests have nearly doubled from about their share now, the percentage of people, adults arrested. Women went from 14% of arrests in 1980 to 27% in 2024. Women's share of being arrested doubled. And girls' share, that's juvenile girls, their share of arrests went from 18% of all arrests to 31% over the same period. So in a matter of 44 years, adult women and juvenile women doubled their rates of arrest. In the late 1990s, women were about 17% of those arrested for violent crimes like murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. By 2010, FBI data show that they were 19.5%, a small jump, but still, it is there. By the way, these are coming from several different sources. I will hit on them here in just a little bit. Assault specifically, this is where one of the really biggest changes is. One analysis of arrests finds that women's share of aggravated assault arrests grew from 1 in 6 instances, that's about 17%, that was in the 1980s, to more than 1 in 4, that's greater than 25% by the 2000s. So in a matter of 30 or 40 years, women's percent of those aggravated assault crimes went from 17% of the share to 25%.
Men are getting more evil.
So, again, that's an increase of about 50%. For juvenile girls, those under the age of 18, arrests for more simple assault increased, get this, about 375%. That's almost 4 times for simple assault. And their aggravated assault went up 143%.
There is a severe rape problem
between 1980 and 2005. So over that 45-year span, juvenile girls, 4 times as many assaults, and then their aggravated assault went up 143%. What else we got here? A Council on Criminal Justice review notes that the share of girls arrested for violent crimes nearly doubled from 20% to 19%, again, between 1980 and 2020. In 2024 presentation shows that in the 40 years between 1980 and 2020, women's arrest rates for aggravated assault increased while men's fell.
Men's obsession with violence is gender affirming.
So there's a couple of different aspects here that we need to understand. Not only in many instances are men's crimes, especially those related to assault, men's have substantially decreased, while women's are, and many times are increasing. And let me pause here while I can fix this camera here. Okay, so again, there is a couple of things to consider here. One is that in many cases, men's instances of crimes, especially related to things like assault, have substantially decreased, while women's have increased. So let's look at this. On the accused side, women are still a minority of violent crime arrestees, right? And listen, I am not here to say that men are doing less crime than women. We all know that that's not true, and it probably will always be the case in which men are doing most of the crime. I firmly believe that. But what we need to admit is that things have changed over the past 3-4 decades, and that men are improving, women are either flatlined or not improving at all, or getting worse. So women's share has clearly grown, especially in assault cases and especially for juveniles. So let's talk about overall incarceration rates for women. This one is staggering to me. The number of incarcerated women, that's for all offenses, increased more than 585%. That's almost 6 times from 1980 to 2022. It went up 6-fold. That's arrests of all women, making them the fastest growing segment in the U.S. population. So women are creating or getting arrested for crimes faster than men at an increasing rate. And this is what many women are in for. In 2018, I wish I had something more recent for this, but in 2018, 38% of women in state prisons were serving time for a violent offense. That's nearly 4 out of 10 for violent offenses. And women were more likely than men to be in for property or drug crimes. That surprised me a little bit too, but many sources that I looked through for this one indicate that women are far more likely to be charged and arrested and even incarcerated, I believe, for drug crimes than men are. What else do I have here? A Council on Criminal Justice analysis shows that among women in state prisons, the share of imprisoned for violent offenses rose from 35% in 2006 to 44% in 2022. Again, what this is saying is that they're comparatively between men and women are becoming more incarcerated than are men, a larger proportion of women compared to all imprisonments. As of 2020, there were about 32,000 women in state prisons for violent crimes, including roughly 10,000 for murder and non-negligent manslaughter. In local jails, a large share are there on felony charges, including violent offenses. And so on the convicted side, the raw number of women serving time for violent offenses has risen very, very sharply. And violent crimes now make up a larger share of women's prison sentences than they did 10, 20, 15, 20 years ago. So what we can see is that women are getting arrested more for more violent things. Their sentences have gone up, many of them now getting 10 or more years on their sentence. So when we put all of this together, women's presence in the criminal justice system has grown and outpaced those of men much faster. And their share of arrests has almost doubled. Their number in prisons have increased almost 7-fold since 1980. We have 7 times more women in prisons now than we did in 1980, growing almost exponentially faster than those of men. So let's see, within all of that, violent categories, particularly assault, make up a growing share of female arrests and sentences, and the gender gap in assault arrests has narrowed. Again, meaning in many cases, men's crimes are coming down, women's are either staying stable, stupid camera, or increasing. So the gap in that is coming to parity. And this is one thing that a lot of reporters, especially in the news, and and professors, people that are doing research, one of the things that they love to point out is that a lot of this has to do with definitions, the way that crimes are perceived and defined, right? So broadened legal definitions of assault, for example. But to my response to that is men are operating under the same laws that women are. And one of the things that I love to point out is that it appears that over the last several decades, we've had a reduced tolerance for women's behavior that men were doing, and now finally women are also being arrested and convicted of these crimes. So a reduced tolerance for behaviors that used to be handled informally rather than a wholesale surge in women's actual violent behavior. That's what they like to say. Well, they're not doing any more crimes. They're now just, those things that they were doing are now considered crimes. And again, my response is men are operating under the same laws. Women are just now, over the last, I would say, 10 years, probably we've been making a good level of progress about this, is that we're treating women more the same as men. We've got a long, long way to go. So I hate hearing that response that, well, it's just that they're not doing any more violent behaviors. They're doing the same behaviors, but now they're considered to be arrestable or convictable. Right? That makes me absolutely sick to hear that. So I've already gone through a lot of that. I hope it didn't bore you too much, but now let me go in and pull out some of these actual sources. Listen, I could do this all day long. These just happen to be, again, maybe I think I came up with about 14 or 15 different sources. I'm not going to go through all of them. Again, check the links for stuff that you want to dive into a little bit more, but I will go through some of the highlights and some of the graphs and charts that I've come across. So this coming from the Council on Criminal Justice. Here what we see is adult arrests from 1980 to 2024, and we can see that women's arrests continue to increase way up until the early 2000s, has started to decline as men have as well. Here is what I think is much more telling, right? And so when I was mentioning that there's a couple of things we need to be conscious of here. One is that in a lot of cases, men's instances of arrests for various crimes have substantially reduced, whereas those of women have not. And that's where we get the much larger proportion of women committing these crimes. Check this out, how far men's commissions or men's arrests have declined since it looks like their peak in 1989. It's less than half. It's like a third of what it was, right? So men's arrests continue to substantially decline, such that women are now, it looks like about 1/3 of all arrests. Women's, again, has stayed pretty much flatline over the last 45 years. And here's where we see, again, this is women's share, women's percentage of arrests has gone from 14% in 1980 to now 27%. Women's percentage of all arrests has nearly doubled in the last 45 years. And for those, I had mentioned juvenile girls, they have been making substantial progress, it looks like here, as far as their arrests. But again, when we look at the parity between juvenile boys and juvenile girls, look at this again. It's the same decline. Boys far less to be arrested, far less likely, and far fewer instances. So when people tell you about men are so violent and it's always been this way,
Men are getting more evil.
Let's debrief angry men again.
one of the reasons I love doing videos like this is to inform you so that you can tell Mary Jane, that's funny, I don't know why I said Mary Jane, over in apartment 507, when she starts talking about how violent men are, you can tell her this, and men are far less likely to be arrested for anything in the last 40 years, while women are, in fact, what are we looking at here? 1385 and 13. Literally, women are more likely to be arrested. And again, we see the disparity here. So when people tell you that men are violent, men are committing all of these crimes, I hope that you can use some of this information to put them back into their place. What else can we look at here? So this is, again, juvenile girls, their share, their percentage of all arrests went from 18% up to 31%, right? So a lot more girls being arrested as far as a percentage goes. And this one goes into a little bit more detail about specific types of arrests. If we look at this solid line right here down on the bottom, this is women's violent arrests. Again, pretty flat line, pretty stable over the years. Men's decreased substantially from, let's say, 1994, from the mid-90s down here. And again, this is why we see women are a much larger percentage of all arrests than they had been in several decades ago. If we look at women's property crime arrests versus men's, again, we can see men's have declined from here all the way down to here. Women's drug arrests have increased substantially. Look at it's this blue type line right here. And it's come down in the last couple of years. One thing I did notice is that across genders, across crimes, everything else, incarceration, arrest rates, all declined quite a bit during the pandemic and are now on the rise again. And what is this like? Men's drug arrests. This is right here. Again, so men's drug arrests have been coming down very sharply since 2006. Well, again, women's drug arrests have been increasing. And when we look at incarceration rates by sex, again, we can see women, their numbers, this is per 100,000, women pretty much stayed stable, while men, again, their imprisonment and jail incarceration rates coming down sharply and substantially. Again, when people tell you that men are committing all these crimes and they're in jail, again, is there an issue? Is there a problem? I'm saying that yes, there is. But look at this improvement. What is next? sexes in jails, and this is what I was talking about in during the pandemic in 2020. This fell substantially for both men and women, but again, we can see improvement for men over the years, and a flat line, a little bit of an increase for women. And here's where we can see, I mentioned a little bit ago about the number of incarcerated females. Check this out. Back in 1982, federal, state, and local jails, their combined was, looks like 30-ish thousand, something like that. Look at this. We had the pandemic right here, right? So 2020 went down, and this is where I said a lot of it, for I think for both men and women, maybe women in more than men, is starting to climb right back up to where it used to be. But look at the numbers of women incarcerated over the last 40, 45 years. This one's just incredible to me. And here's one I think that probably will stir some feathers. I was really surprised to find this one, to be honest. We look at reported sexual victimizations from 2011 to 2012, right? So this is just a 1 or 2 year sample. Women that are incarcerated are 3 times more likely to be sexually victimized by another imprisoned person. That's another a jailmate, a cellmate, somebody else that's also incarcerated. 3 times more likely for that to happen than for them to be assaulted by staff. Look at this, 7% compared to 2.3%. Men more likely to be sexually victimized by staff than by other imprisoned persons. So again, when we talk about prisons, women are out there doing nasty stuff to each other far, far more than the staff are doing to those women who are incarcerated, right? So they cannot even control themselves while they're locked up. Oh, and by the way, let me just point out that that was in prisons. If we look at jails, it's the same thing. Far fewer instances, less likely to happen in jails, county jails, city jails, things like that. But we still see the same thing. Women far more likely to be victimized by another incarcerated woman than they are by staff. In another one of my sources, I realize that this one is a bit old. It's 25 years old. But we can even see that even back then, this stuff was being reported. It just didn't make it to the headlines. Big surprise, right? So some notes that I highlighted here. Since 1990, so for about a decade, the number of female defendants convicted of felonies in state courts had grown more than 2 times the rate increase in male defendants, right? So women far more substantially increasing in their felony convictions in state courts. And this one here, 3 out of 4 victims of violent female offenders were women, telling us that 3 out of 4 times women are attacking themselves. That's who they attack, other women. In 1996, the average sentence and time served for women were shorter than males with equivalent offenses. And we all know that that's been true for a long time. But again, something you'll never see on the 6 o'clock or the 11 o'clock news. They never report those things. Scroll down a little bit. Victim-offender relationship. Female victims, far more likely to be a victim of an acquaintance as opposed to an intimate partner. And what we see here is that male victims, far more likely than women, to be victimized by an intimate partner, right? So again, when you say men are abusive, men are doing this to their girlfriends, to their wives, this data right here, again, a little bit old. I don't know how much this has changed, but shows that men far, far more likely than women to be victimized by someone that they're in an intimate relationship with. What else? I've got a few more here. Parents who, KILL, mothers and stepmothers committed about half of child murders. I'm trying to keep my language YouTube friendly here. Maybe I'll just have to bleep some of this stuff out. But look at this. So stepmothers committed half of those. And mothers were responsible for a higher share of children killed during infancy. So if it's an infant child, mothers are responsible for a higher share than men. Tell me again that they're not violent. What do we have here? Felony convictions of women in state courts. Violent felonies. Look at these. Look at this increase from 1990, 91, nope, 90, 92, 4, and 6. Increasing all the way through. A little bit of a dip right here. But percentage change. Women's changes in rape and sexual assault increased by 119%. Yeah, in 1990, their number was 202, went up to 442. That's up 119%. And you can see all of their violent felonies up 30% during those years. Other felonies up 65%. You can see all of these positive numbers right here mean that between 1990 and 1996, women's involvement in all of these went up except for murder. That's it. Everything else went up, and by substantial amounts, but too, by the way. We can see up by 55%, up by 37%, up by 54% for aggravated assault. Let me see if I can find another one. Again, I don't want to bore you with too much, and I'll leave all of the links. I could do all of this all day long. So let me find another one real quick, and I'll let you be on your way. All right, so let's take a look at this one. From 1973 to 2005, right? So we've got, what is that, 32-year span right here. Percent of female involvement in single offender incidents by type of crime. So we can see that women's simple assault, this top line right here, look how much that increased. From here, trend line goes all the way up. We can see the same thing for aggravated assault. This goes way, way up. This is per 1,000 citizens, and robbery gone way, way up as well. So all of these trend lines we can see from 73 to 2005, women's involvement in these crimes went up. And again, as I've already showed, men's have been substantially decreasing since the mid-1990s. And case in point, aggravated assault by offending gender. Here we can see men. Again, this is from 73 to 2005. Men and their aggravated assault going down, this trend line right here. And again, this looks like, yep, right around 94, 95, that steady, sharp, decrease in men's involvement in those crimes. Women, stable for a long time, decreased marginally over here. But again, what we can see is when people tell you that men are becoming more violent, men are getting arrested for more things, and we can't trust them. You know, we can't walk through a car park. I hope that you have these conversations with people that tell you those things. Men's decreasing far substantially. Women's dropping just a little bit. And here we can see the trend line. This is the percentage of men to women committing these things. And we can see women's percentage of these crimes increasing over the decades. So I'll just leave it at that. I think it was only 3 different sources that I went over with these graphs. Again, I could do this all day long, and we would all get bored at some point. But I hope this is helpful in you having conversations. That's, again, why I love doing this content, is to help you be prepared to have conversations and to back people and put them back into their place when they start telling you about how bad men are. I hope that I've given you truth in that men are becoming far less likely to be involved in crimes. Women, in many cases, depending on the types of crime, far more instances of that. And comparatively, women are taking up a far higher percentage of involvement in those crimes than men have over the last 20, 30, 40 decades. So again, my name is Todd. I'm a psychologist who supports men. If this is something that you're interested in, more content like this, please stick around, because my intention is to do content and breakdowns like this that no other content, no other channel is doing. I take a lot of pride in bringing this information